Alright, there we go. Welcome, folks. Welcome to our stream tonight. We're continuing our journey through plague-ridden, paramilitary overrun, post-apocalyptic DC in a video game, not in real life. I hope if you are in DC, you're safe and taking care of yourselves. We're playing Tom Clancy's Division 2, iteration in the posthumous Tom Clancy universe. Tom Clancy, quite dead at this point, but like author of numerous novels of intrigue and espionage and modern war, and who, by the way, little factoid, if you was plugged by Ronald Reagan, also quite dead. But if anyone ever is like, what's this postmodern idea of the death of the author mean? Tom Clancy has written like 15 books. Even though he is 6 feet underground. And so, there you go. Just because an author dies doesn't mean that their name, the author function, doesn't continue spewing out. And that includes books like, Tom Clancy's Op Centers, to video games and several reboots of the Tom Clancy Jack Ryan franchise. But in this game, The Division, we are members of The Division, namely an elite corps of, wait for it, operators, on whose shoulders rests the responsibility to save civilization, decency, and norms, and all that is good in the American way, from the barbarians at the gate or within the gate, or within the gated community that threaten it. So yes, we are operators. We run around, do loot 'em, shoot 'em shit, and fight our way through a pretty realistically recreated Washington, D.C., that's what we're going to do tonight, but what we're really going to do is we're also going to talk about, police. We're going to talk about the Capitol Police. We're going to talk about what happened at the Capitol, and we're just going to, basically hang out and share how we feel about what's been happening, at which point I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you, everyone who's, been talking with me over the course of the past day or two about this stuff. Thank you in particular, Dan, for the beer and all the technical support. Oh, shit. And also thank you very much, dear friend and friend of the stream, Richard White, aka Insurgencia, with whom I had a really, really astute conversation earlier today. We're on some, gotta swap some new plates. My plate carrier. Oh my God, this is what happens when you're thanking people instead of saying in condition yellow. Yeah, Dan is a tech king. But yeah, I was talking with Richard today. We were playing DayZ's Richard's server you should check out. I'll drop a link in the chat to that. It's a wonderful game, and Richard's a dear friend. But basically, I'm still thinking about what happened last night, and I suspect you all are, or yesterday, and I suspect everyone else is also thinking about what happened yesterday. And I guess what I have some thoughts 24 hours later, but what I really wanted to sort of do was give everyone permission to share in the chat or in the Discord their thoughts about what's happening and their feelings about it without feeling like they have to pretend to understand it or where it's going, let alone that they have to take a side. And I'm not saying that look here, I'm not saying please the pro-Trump thing, no, miss me with that shit. But what I'm saying, what I really want us to think about is the way in which the spectacle that we saw unfolding on TV kind of
incoming backup request
made a lot of us, and I felt this too, feel a kind of temptation to be oh yeah, the cops should fuck people up, or what would happen if this weren't Trump people, right? Or basically to feel a lot of emotions, first and foremost confusion and fear and anger, and to immediately start identifying with various participants in the scenario. And what I want us to do within the safe space of the chat and the Discord, and just also the weird space that is this video game, is not actually feel compelled to follow through on that. Because Twitter and some of these other social platforms, or maybe people you're talking to in your family and friends. Sorry, we're gonna kill all the dogs because it's DC and they're wild dogs. It's bad. You have this impulse to take a side, to pretend that you know exactly what's happening, and to know exactly who you have to cast your lot with, and and just to have a take. And I mean, my job is to have takes and to pretend to know what's happening, and I don't pretend to know what's happening right now, and I honestly don't actually have any takes. Or at least I have some, but like they're not like, they're all about how I don't actually know what's happening. I have certain suspicions and worries, which is what I want to talk about, but like I want you to not feel compelled at this point yet to... So let's just like, that's like the ground rule of it. But also we're just going to be shooting a lot of people and, you know, fighting our way through DC. Hey folks, hey Cam, it's good to see you. Ramza, hey Three Toad. We're currently working our way through, I don't fucking know where this is in DC, but we're on the way to something called the Jefferson Trade Complex, where we're gonna... Look, basically, DC has fallen because of viruses and right-wing assholes, and operators are the only hope. And we're an operator with purple hair, and we're gonna save people from bad stuff. I think that's basically what I have for you. It's not exactly like the most complicated. Yeah, like, but yeah, like I really want to like, hey Richard, like again, like I just want us to like think about what's going on. Like, what's the deal with like? You see chaos on television, and you expect things to happen, right? You expect like certain types of clarity, or certain types of events. Like you expect stuff that you might have seen in movies, right? Or that you've seen on CNN, right? And like, in fact, I was watching CNN last night, which was kind of instructive, and like, oh shit, sure, I'll take this HK 416 knockoff, sure. But like you want to like identify with, you like have certain sets of expectations, and you feel this kind of like pull, like what we talked about when we talked about like the work of this Marxist theorist Louis Althusser, and this idea of like interpolation, like namely this idea of like you're getting called into this you got to take a position, right? And the example actually that Althusser gives for what interpolation is you're walking down a fucking street, you're doing your own thing, and a cop says, "Hey you," and this little thing in the back of your own head, like you feel suspicious, you feel called out, and you turn around. You're called out by the police, and he has some broader points about how that's like language, that's like the nature of language and existing together in the social world and shit. But like, oh, okay, the example itself is suggestive, right? Like it's the cop that does the calling in. It's not your mother. It's not like anything, and it's also like a cop in conjunction with like a tendency inside your own head. And that's kind of what I want us to think about. Like, what's up? Where do those two things meet? Like, what's up with the police as people in the world, right? As an institution in the world, but also, and this is something that I like really, you know, if tonight's your first time on the stream, sorry, I just called out my little drone here. We don't. Like, I want us to think about like the police as an institution, sure. But I also want us to think about policing as an activity, as like a social institution that's more than just cops. And that's something that we all, in different ways, can like, well, may feel ourselves interpolated into, called into, right? And again, we're playing a fucking video game and we're just processing events. Let's resist the immediacy of having to identify ourselves with that. Because like, it's not like what you say you think is going to happen or who you side with on Twitter is going to make a fucking difference to what happens in the streets. Like, my KD tonight is not going to affect what's going to happen in the streets of DC. What you say in the chat is not going to actually, like, that. You're not carrying the world on your shoulders like that. Threatening civilians, that's unacceptable. We're just going to rock this M14 here. Never shot an M14? Kind of really want to. It looks super fun. Alright, here we go. Ooh. I'll just say also in terms of gameplay, what we're doing here is we're leveling up a low-level character, because sometime next week or the week after, I have some friends who are figures who some of you may know from like the lefty blogosphere universe, who I think may join us for some multiplayer, and that's going to be awesome. But yeah, like, on the subject of cops, and like here in this game, like we're playing as like the police after the police are gone, right? Or this like kind of thing where the police and military meet. Like, there's this thing going on where it's like, I hear a lot of liberals right now being like, oh my god, this is terrible. This is a failure of policing. The fact that the police let protesters or coup would-be insurrectionists, I don't even know, like, I don't even want to use these words, because, like, we're going to bracket that, right? I will definitely put on a polo shirt. Let these people in is a failure of policing. And meanwhile, a lot of the people who were in the streets and who were a lot of them are fucking assholes, are saying stuff like, this is terrible, the police aren't supposed to shoot at us, they're supposed to shoot at Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And between those two things, like, these liberals being like, oh, the police have failed, and on the other hand, people being like, but by not protecting the Capitol. On the other hand, people being like, the police have failed by shooting us and not the bad guys. Like, you're getting different visions of, like, implicit visions of what the police are supposed to be doing, right? What is successful policing such that this is a failure? And what I'm increasingly thinking about, and this is, conversations with people like Richard and like, the work I've been doing for the past couple of years and the classes I've been teaching, is how, maybe there's actually a way that we can think about what policing is and what the institution of police are. Okay, we're not going to shoot raccoons because raccoons are Antifa brothers. That would accommodate, that would explain what the vision is of the proper function of policing, such that both right-wing assholes and kind of smug liberal assholes right now would be equally angry at describing this as a failure. Like, that's like the gambit I want us to talk about. Don't worry, it doesn't make sense. We'll get to what that means. We'll unpack it. But, like, yeah, like, what do you all think? Like, what should the police have? What did the police do yesterday? And what do you think they should have done? I'm going to keep shooting people, and then I'm going to read what people are saying in the chat. We're gonna dialogue a little bit, and I'm going to leverage my ADD and this really good beer to try and balance those things. Hey, Joel. Good to see you, man. Hey, Aaron. Good to see you, too. Yeah, I'm actually, Taichi, yeah, I am, I'm thinking about that, too. Yeah, like, it's, I don't know how to pronounce your name, sorry, but the Stanford prison experiment, right? This, like, Philip Zimbardo, whatever the fuck his name is, like this, some of you may be familiar with this, right? Like, it's a psychology experiment back in the days before institutional review board stuff, where basically, like, this Stanford psychology professor, has drafts students to serve as prisoners and prison guards, and, like, documents what they do in this, like, situation, for several days, how, like, how people dominate one another. But yeah, like, that's, like, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's, like, kind of what I want to talk about. Like what's up with our desire to identify with authority? And I will say that also the reference to Zimbardo is not out of place, insofar as that motherfucker is a major. His theories about, like, disorder and violence are very important for the criminologists in the 1980s who invent what is known as broken windows policing. We'll talk more about what that means, but just, like, yeah, like, we're vibing at the point at which we're thinking about these people. Like, what's up with, like, what's going on in our heads where, we see disorder in the streets, and we see a bunch of people with badges and guns, and sometimes we're like, hey, like, what's up with us as bystanders or an audience to be like, God damn, these people with guns are not doing their job right. Like, to be like their managers. But also to be like, I don't know, just... Richard put this to me very well, and I won't put words in his mouth, so Richard, correct me if I say anything incorrect, but, like, I'm thinking about, like, what would be the deal? Like, if hypothetically, a group of protesters were to occupy the Capitol, which is the People's House, because, like, we wanted Medicare for all, or debt relief, or to end, like, the foreclosure crisis. How would you want the police to deal with that? Right? How do you think these police would actually deal with it? But also, like, what would you hope that they'd deal with it? Yeah. That's right, Cam. I think that's a good question too. Like, this is like, yeah, I think we should. Cam's onto something here, Nighthawk. Like, I think we should. I want us to do two things. Like, I want us to like talk about like these specific police where it's like clearly they. I think there's some sketchy shit that went down, right? Like, they're. Everything we're going to be talking about tonight is not incompatible with the fact that the police are. We're probably some of them were sympathetic to the protesters to the Trump types. Some, there were off-duty police among them, right? Like, I think we should, like, it's not the conspiracy theory stuff to talk about how, like, there are right-wing pro-Trump elements in, like, the Proud Boys who are cops and vice versa. But also, like, I'm, like, wondering about, like, if something really bad were happening, let's say a couple 100,000 Americans were dying every year because of a plague, and there was no, like, relief for it, and we got together and did an occupation of the Capitol. I mean, how would we want the police to treat us? Again, I'm not pushing something here. I'm thinking this through. I'm like asking these questions because like a lot of people I'm following or reading are like, well, the police did XYZ that was wrong, and I'm like, well, what are your expectations? What do you want them to do? Do you want them to shoot these people? Do you want like I really want us to think this through because I don't have answers tonight. Like I have some thoughts, but I want us to like think it through. Yeah. This is Division 2. Yeah, she was. She was an Air Force vet. Yeah, you're right, Joel. Yeah, Joel. Yep. Yeah, like I think like the police could have just fucking wiped people out. Like they could have like. I think like these same police would have fucked people up if it was BLM, if it was like anyone else. Like I don't think there's any question about that, right?
Last radio contact with Espinosa came from a parking garage close to the shade node.
Yeah. And we're gonna blow up this red barrel because, as we've all learned together, red barrels are fairly hazardous. I wouldn't stand if I were a henchman or just a person. I would not stand near a red barrel, particularly if it was glowing. It seemed like a bad idea, but I'm not gonna tell anyone how to live. Yeah, like a lot of like leftist like protest stuff in like the 60s and shit are all about like the cop in your own head, right? Which like sounds like kind of woo and goofy, but I think it kind of gets at one of the things that several people in the chat are talking about tonight, where it's like people feel a need for authority, and there's particularly when things are scary, right? And whether it's calling the manager or calling the police, like there's a kind of like desire to identify with authority, to assume that authority is going to help you, but also that like to think about what would you do if you were the authority, right? Hey, Neville. Yeah, the Zimbardo stuff is interesting. Like I think there are many reasons why that was that created irony. Shit. Okay, yeah, this M14 is sick though. Oh, that's bad. Yeah, me neither. I'm with you on that, Cam. Like Nighthawk is saying that like people like it's hard to put yourself in that mindset. Yeah, like I'll be honest, like I've occupied some spaces in like protests and stuff. Like I don't think I have the stones to like climb Capitol walls. Like I don't. Independent of like, I'm not like expressing admiration for them. I'm just like I don't know what they were trying to accomplish, right? Like, but also like this is one of those things too, where it's like the people would be like, well, I don't know what these these BLM protesters were trying to accomplish. And like, I don't necessarily something I'm wondering about, and I'm curious what people think, is like,
portable device detected.
Does a group of people who are angry for many reasons have to have a clear unifying intention? Oh shit. Right? Like, I don't know. I think if we treat it as a symptom rather than as like a message, I don't know. I'm just, again, I don't have an answer here. I'm just thinking it through as you know. Yeah, that's right. That's right, Cam. Yeah. That's right, Cam. They seem to be like, yeah, it's like, they seem to, yeah, I think if I were to fuck around, like, I would not, I don't know, the only people who've ever pointed a gun at me in my life so far have been cops, and, yeah, I don't, I certainly wouldn't,
Hostile radio
unless I, like,
We're under attack!
I would have to be privy to some weird information to walk into a Capitol building, like, with a plate carrier,
So?
and not expect to get shot. Yeah, that's right. I can't get into that headspace. So, the Turner Diaries is one of those books. The Turner Diaries is one of those books I'd recommend you steal. Don't buy it. Has been read by, I think it's a couple million Americans at this point. Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, made a living selling copies of the Turner Diaries. I think it's William Luther Pierce is the pseudonym of the author. But it's basically, yeah, it's like a right-wing, like... It's actually weirdly like a Tom Clancy novel. It's like a bunch of Nazi... I mean, they're Nazis in the sense that they call out Hitler and they venerate him. But it's a bunch of hard right-wing militants do ethnic cleansing in a near future United States. And it's incredibly violent. Like, I don't recommend you read it. I mean, you may want to read it to like get a sense of what a lot of people think, but yeah, it's pretty horrible. It's sort of a Bible of a certain. So, and some of the tropes that you're hearing from these people, like the day of the rope, like the idea that you're gonna carry fucking senators out and like lynch them in the streets, like that's Turner Diary stuff. And also, I should say, like, we're playing this game. I clearly don't have a problem with the representation of violence. Like, I think people, like, one of the things we've sort of worked through is that like certain types of violence can be kind of fun in terms of the representation. But like the deal with like a book like the Turner Diaries is that it's a different kind of like extended descriptions of like the pleasures of meeting. It's that kind of like it's some rabid and remarkably de-aestheticized celebration of causing suffering. And, it's a scary fucking book to read. Oh fuck.
Immediate medical assistance needed.
Oh!
Vital signs 0.
Hey, Dan? Yeah. Permission structure. That's an interesting, yeah, that's an interesting turn of phrase. I think that should be a play in this.
Look for a way down to the garage and see if you can pick up Espinosa's trail. He tends to leave a mess.
I think I'm going to need to work us through this gunfight without getting capped, but I'm going to keep an eye on the chat and talk as I do it. Yeah, I think like a permission structure, it's like a frame for understanding, for like making things thinkable. I think that's like a way to gloss it, right? It's like stuff like, well, you know, like, these people are traitors, and, you know what we do to traitors, but also we have to be better than that, right? Like, it's kind of like, it's a term that I've heard that's related to another one that you sometimes hear, which is like stochastic terrorism, right? Which is this idea that, as opposed to like terrorism that's being like, you, agent XYZ, go kill target 123, it instead like creates it's instead about like creating a discourse or a climate or like a set of tropes or a narrative where it's like, well, these people are the enemies of the state, these people are the enemies of the state. Back in the good old days, we knew what to do with the enemies of the state. Now, I'm not saying you should go kill the enemies of the state, but back in the old days, there used to be real men who would, right? And the idea is that at scale, when you have a, you know, in a sufficiently like, you know, sizable population and with like enough media going on, like some crazy person somewhere or some like not so crazy person somewhere is going to get that message, right? Like, and that's so like, as opposed to directing concrete acts of terror in the stochastic model, you're actually just like making, you're basically constantly greenlighting certain people. And I think that's related to the permission structure stuff. Yeah, I think that's right. That tracks, Joel. And like, oh, so the game will allow us to join other people playing. This person's a little far away, and I don't think I'll be able to help them. But yeah, I think that's the way to think of it. Yeah, paralipsis. Yeah, or like a praeteritio, or like an antiphasis, to use like the Greek and Latin terms for this, where it's like, some people are saying we should kill all my enemies, but I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we should kill our, you know, like that kind of thing where you're continually like nudging, and, you know, the people who have ears to hear, like they get the dog whistle. Which I think like we can tie in with what we're talking about the police too, where it's like people look for narratives, right? Like, and I think we as Americans have a very strong impulse to be like, oh yeah, like, someone with a gun should fix this. Like, someone with a gun should be in charge right now. And I think we probably should not trust that.
Okay, so where do we stand?
Basically, everybody outside about a 50-mile radius of DC is completely cut off from the network. Completely.
What do we do about it?
First, we need to assess the full scope of the damage, which means going places that won't be easy to get to.
Because they're hostile territory.
It's not just that. The flooding did a lot of damage, especially underground, which is where most of our infrastructure is located.
Think it was flooding that caused the network to go down?
Exactly, yeah, it's like a plausible deniability.
You're near Espinosa's last known position. The shade node should be close.
Like, Trump is a master of this, right? Like, I never specifically said that what was that guy's name? Cesar Sayoc, the dude who had the van full of pipe bombs and he wanted to kill, like, half the MSNBC primetime, lineup. I never told this guy to kill anybody. I just, you know, consistently told 300 million people in my nightly broadcast that these people were enemies of the Republic. Like, you know, it's like a bad faith way to activate people to do stuff. And we should say too, like, I talk about this book a lot. I really recommend this book. Where is this? Actually, I'll post a review that I wrote of it. But my friend Kathleen Ballou has this book called Bring the War Home, and it's basically a history of white power militancy since the 1970s, and it's all about like organized terrorism by neo-Nazis and the Klan, and the key thing here is that those groups come together, right? There's a specific period of time where like these groups get together and are like, well, we have certain differences, but actually we can work together. And one of the things that they decide they're going to do is basically like stochastic terrorism. Like, they're going to restock. is they adopt what's sometimes called the lone wolf model, right? And they call it that. That's their term for it. That's the idea that like people are gonna, instead of okay. What is this? Sorry, this game here right now is just being a little weird. But the idea is that like instead of like having terrorist cells that are working together and then, you know, taking orders from up high, you're going to have individuals who are lone wolves and who basically pick up on the messages and in a decentralized way carry out acts of high casualty violence, and like Timothy McVeigh being one of those examples, right? And Kathleen's work is a really scary documentation of this. Okay, unfortunately, I can't actually see what my I have the little Twitch header here telling me. Come on. I gotta go down there somehow. B. There we go. There we go. Yeah, this book is really good. Here, I'm gonna post a link to it. And like part of what her deal is like is that a lot of this is tethered to the history of U.S. military defeat. Here's a review I wrote for The Nation of this book. And it's available also as an audiobook, and she's a good Twitter follow, too. Let's see. But, like, it's a history, like, one of the things that, like, I didn't realize it until, like, I read her book, right, is that white power nationalist, and she uses this term white power, it's different from, like, white supremacy. These are particular people who, like, they read the Turner Diaries, they think that, you know, they're, like, anti-government, even though many of them are trained by the government and, you know, work with the elements of the government sometimes. Like, their whole thing is that they want a white nationalist homeland in like Idaho or the Pacific Northwest, but they want like, but like these fuckers, like, there's a thing that happens in a lot of American media where we think about these people as being like hicks and like sort of like simplistic, like neo-Nazis were the first people to use the internet for movement organizing in like the late 80s, early 90s. Like they were the first people to use like message boards and email, the first civilians to like plan attacks and stuff. Right? So like all this stuff now where it's like, oh, they're on 4chan, like they were on 4chan, like, but like that they're like somehow like always one step ahead of law enforcement because of their tech savviness. Like this is true from the start. Like they were early adopters and innovators in a type of decentralized violence. And they're also like, the other thing too is like they're this is related to another book that I've talked about sometimes, which is a little more like academic. This book reads like a novel. We'll talk more about like the forgetting angle, because like part of what she tells is a story too, where it's like a lot of these attacks, like Greensboro, North Carolina, or even you could argue the Oklahoma City like bombing, like people like a lot of like U.S. media and a lot of like politicians like don't connect, like very strikingly don't view this as a coordinated collective problem. They're instead like, well, you know, like it was just one mentally ill guy, right? Or like Timothy McVeigh was a lone wolf. Like they don't, you know, whereas, you know, when it's like Muslims or whatnot, it becomes a national organization. But like, but like the idea, what she sort of basically argues is that like this is a movement that has close ties to power and or close ties with elements in the U.S. aspects of the U.S. military and like the Imperial Project. And another book that I occasionally cite and talked about in the context of the Call of Duty games, right? Is I think it's Kyle Burke's Revolutionaries for the Right, Anti-Communist Paramilitaries, and like the Cold War. But like during this same period, and Kathleen has a couple chapters on this. These same dudes, a lot of them are Vietnam veterans, right? A lot of them are like special forces guys who fight in Vietnam. They have the experience of the U.S. being humiliated by, you know, Viet Cong in black pajamas, right, or whatever the line is. Like, and basically, they do something that's very similar to the way that like the Nazi, like World War One veterans viewed the defeat of the German Empire. Like, well, we were stabbed in the back at home by liberals, by communists, by some combination of ethnic minorities and Marxists, right? So like Jews and communists and black people and liberals, like they're all come together like a type of composite enemy. A lot of those guys like organized via like Soldier of Fortune magazine and stuff to do mercenary stuff abroad, and many of them wound up being employed by the U.S. government, by like the CIA and shit. And Burke's book is a history of this, but like some of these Nazi motherfuckers, like they were deployed in Nicaragua, they were deployed in Rhodesia, right? They tried to take over Dominica in the Caribbean, like they literally tried to stage a coup to like create their own white nationalist nation state at one point in the Caribbean that didn't work out. Like, but they mounted like serious campaigns of terror against everything from like American communists to
There should be a terminal that'll let you reactivate the
Vietnamese
node.
immigrant shrimp fishermen in the Texas and Florida Panhandle. Like, they have a serious body count, and it was an organized movement. But for some reason, people don't, they don't get talked about like that. Yes. You're right, Cam, with that too. Like, it's scary to like, the energy is there. It's so misguided. Well, yeah, that's right. I think she's right on that. Three Toad. Yes. Yeah, the lion. Oh,
Authorization granted.
Fantastic.
Please stand by. Intelligent System Analytic Computer reactivated. All Isaac subsystems operational.
That was the last step to getting Isaac fully restored locally. But we have a ways to go before we can celebrate. And a missing agent to locate. Continue your sweep of the complex.
Alright, I'm going to continue sweeping the
Hostile
complex.
radio intercepted.
Hello? Is this the division? Looking for someone?
Who is this? How are you on this channel?
Friend of yours gave me a real nice wristwatch. He's right here. Want to talk to him? If you want him back, we can make a deal. You back off, we'll deliver him unharmed. Mostly.
They'll keep him alive. They aren't stupid. Just find that hyena piece of shit and waste her.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me that I keep coming back to is like a lot of these are people who are like really deeply. A lot of these veterans, like, they've been used, right? Like, they've been horribly abused by a power structure, and like. Their lives and the lives of their friends have been squandered for what, right? Like the war in Vietnam, like there was no reason for the U.S. to fight them, right? To get involved in like fucking Ho Chi Minh quotes the Declaration of Independence, right, in his initial stuff. Like the idea of like, and initially thought that the U.S. would support him, right? The fact that like so many Americans get like killed to repress wars of national liberation from like colonized people, like it's really it's a mammoth kind of betrayal, right?
Detected.
And and I feel like the people, but and that's a moral injury, right? Like, and I feel like you could say the same about the war on terror now, but like. There's something really heartbreaking and evil about the fact that a lot of men come back from that experience to be like, well, yeah, the problem is, like the Jews in my local synagogue, right? Or like, or actually, it's gay people and liberals. Like, there's a kind of like that way in which like fear and hatred is like capitalized upon. instead of being like the way that trauma and betrayal is mobilized to really do horrible things instead of being, you know, being directed at actually powerful people who don't care, is a really bad situation. Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna need. I really want some of you all to get the Division 2 so we can play this together, because like doing it one-on-one, like it's hard with me just on this. Also think maybe we'll pivot to some COD at some point. That. But yeah, like I did want to talk about cops a little bit, because it's like I don't think like you and I don't need to. We don't need to be like, well, you know, the cops should be doing X, Y, Z. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't... Just because I'm scared doesn't mean that somehow, like, the people who I previously, like, was horrified to see hurt the vulnerable, like, they don't suddenly become good just because they're hurting people who I think are assholes, you know? And, like, that's... There's no reason to identify with authority in that way. You don't have to sell your morality in that way. You know? It's cheap. Like, you need to do that. Okay, so I think this purple person is a sniper. Oh shit. There you go. Good lord. Yeah. If memory serves, Ho tried to see, I think Ho tried to get into the Versailles situation. I'm not, 5 Vietnamese hitters, history is important. I just want to, like, play a video game where I'm one of these asshole, like, melee guys, where it's like, you know, you're just going to be one of 15 identical people, and you're going to rush this badass. Oh, shit. I don't know, man. How do you get up in the morning being like, I'm one of 15 machete dudes, and we're just gonna discover mechanics. Alright, I'm really liking this game. The mechanics are good. I love this M14. Like, talk about just like a classic rifle. And this Snap 2 mechanic is pretty. It's a little cheap, but also kind of awesome. Yeah, I mean, like, the essence of policing is, like, it involves this discretion, right? Like that's, like, part of the difficulty with, like... I mean, like, I'll be clear, like, I'm not gonna tell any individual what to do, right? But, like, you know, if you look at some of these other, like... One thing that, like... So U.S. policing in its contemporary form comes from a variety of sources. It comes from, on the one hand, like, I mean, frankly, like, slave patrols and, like... posses on the west that are doing ethnic cleansing, and it also comes from the British model, and you know, from like the police in London, but also the police in Ireland, and the British police and the plantation system in Ireland. Like these are the institutions that come together to create American policing.
Hey guys.
But one thing that, like, the essence of policing, you could argue, is discretion, right? The ability to decide, because, like, you know, you and I, like, everybody, we're always breaking the law. I don't mean that in the sense like we're always like doing like deal felonies, though if you are, whatever, I'm not going to narc on you. But like more of the sense, like if you get into a car, you're not necessarily signaling all the time with the right amount of time before a turn. Like, it's the actual reality is messy. People make mistakes constantly, right? And so a police officer has the discretion, right, to stop you. And that deferral of judgment to police is arguably the most important feature of the police job, right? Like the fact that they have discretion. The discretion to be like, oh, this person needs to be stopped, or we let this person go, or I give this person a warning, or I give this person a ticket, or I arrest this person, right? And the way in which like U.S. discretion, like discretionary policing, cashes out has very few other like. There are no countries like in the developed world, say, in which the courts and the law give police that degree of discretion, right? Or like defer to them. So like the ability to like the fact that so many police can be like, well, I was in fear of my life, so I shot this person. And you got this whole legal apparatus called qualified police, basically be like, well, like if it's these circumstances happen before, okay. That has no real analogies in any other of those other, or hell, like the British system, which is one of the ones we're based on, right? Like, and in fact, like one thing that the British have going, and that is the case for most of the 19th century at least, is that you can sue police officers for false arrest. If a police officer doesn't like. The police officer's discretion can be questioned in a court of law, and the police officer is individually responsible for their decisions, because the police officer in a lot of the British, this isn't necessarily the case anymore, but in a lot of like the Anglosphere it was, and somewhere it still is, the police officer actually functions kind of like a prosecutor. Like they actually have to show up and make their claims before the court. They're not just a witness. Like the prosecutor and police officer are not separated in the hierarchy. We give police incredible discretion in this country. We give them incredible amount of powers and tools, right? From tasers to AR-15s and to like stingrays or whatever the hell, like, and the other thing we have too is kind of like a cultural narrative where, oh shit, I'm gonna get, oh fuck, this heavy's gonna murk me. Like we have all these narratives where it's just like we assume it's police with the answers to stuff, right? We trust them. There's so many narratives, like so much media is all about how the police like structure, like how they basically deserve that discretion. And I'm not making it. I really like I know people who are I have many friends in the military, and I have some friends who want to go on the police side. Like I really want to keep this on a structural level, like that degree of like structural deference goes to some really like bad places, and it's so. Talk about it as being like facilitating abuse is almost misses the point, because it's like, the position itself inherently allows for abuse. Hi, Joel. Yeah, cars are bad. Richard and I have had a couple conversations on the stream about that one, about that point, Taiuchi, where it's like. The difference between laws of war and the discretion of police, I sometimes you hear like, well, the police are actually much more reckless than soldiers are. And it's like, well, maybe not.
Serious trauma.
But yeah, like, oh shit. Locate Agent Espinosa. Then I'm gonna take a 5-minute break and get him here. Dan, providing me with beer tonight. Dan, coming up huge. I want to recommend my friend Alex Vitale's book, actually, The End of Policing. I'll put a link in the stream. It's like $2. He's really good, and he's the real deal. I mean, he's a criminologist, right? And like it's a very, you don't have to like, the evidence is there, right? You can pursue that. Like, you don't have to agree with the whole thing. You don't have to, but he'll give you the bibliography and like or you can go forward and like make your own conclusions, right? But like, I don't know, like, I certainly wouldn't trust myself to decide whether or not other people deserve.
Agent vital signs.
Oh shit.
0.
He didn't have to die
no.
here.
Kill Espinosa. Yes, we are. Yeah, Richard's great. No, I honestly, like, I had a really, like, we're going to be launching Burgertown Break Room soon enough, and we gotta, like, Richard to be it. All that. I mean, like, they also, like, look, I'll be honest, like, with you guys and gals and not binary pals, like, having other people to talk to in these moments is so important. Like, everything is so crazy and incoherent right now that, like, as long as you have people to, like, some degree of reality check, oh, fuck, I got RCXD'd. It's so important just to have, like, some degree of reality check. You know, or just, like, even to say, oh, well, just to talk to someone else about, like, what's going on, and just, like, to know that, like, you're not alone in this of it. This is why we're doing this, right? Like, I'm not actually, like, please support us on Patreon. I'm very grateful for the support, but, like, first and foremost, this is about, like, we're all coming together and doing this together. And just experiencing stuff together. While I play video games, okay. And you're so right, this game is hard. So, Ramza, to your question, the reason it's called interpolation, it's from the French, right? So, the French for, how do I... I guess I had to respond here. Appeler means to call, right? So if you say, I'm called, je m'appelle, I'm called, right? It's calling, it's appellation is a term we have in English, right? And interpolation is being called into, right? It's literally puts the prefix against the verb, right? So yeah, the reason Althusser calls it interpolation, it's being sucked, it's a calling into, it's a... There isn't really a good way to do it. Like English splits the prepositions and the verbs, but yeah, that's why it's called interpolation. So it actually also means that. It means, so to get arrested in French, if you read about, like, il y en avait une manifestation, il y avait des dizaines de gens qui étaient interpellés. There was a protest, there were a dozen people who were arrested. The word for arrest is interpolate. Too. That's like the idiomatic word for it, for being brought in for questioning. But Althusser tropes it as being a linguistic thing, where you're being called in by name. I will also say, and this is just relevant to our conversation on policing, which, you know, I think we're probably just going to keep on talking about over the coming months, because particularly with Biden in charge, it's not going to get any less fucking important. Like, the idea of an arrest, like, we should actually, like, think about, like, etymology is really helpful for thinking about some shit, folks. Like, an arrest means to stop in motion, right? Arrested movement, arrested development, right? To arrest someone is to literally, they're on their trajectory, they're doing something, they're going somewhere, they're doing something, you stop them, right? And that's also, it's related to the French, the cognitive verb from which this comes via Latin, right? The French is arrêter, to stop, right? And this gets at, like, a really key thing about the idea of, like, police, right? And the idea of policing. Like, I know, like, there's a lot of, like, jokes people make about, like, bodies and spaces as, like, this, like, theoretical, like, leftist Tumblr shit. Like, the job of police when they arrest
Thanks for the
people
business.
is to stop a body moving through space. Like literally, you're going about your business, the police stop
Hostile
you and they
broadcast
arrest
detected.
you. Think about that for a second. Go back to like if you had like did any like Newtonian physics in high school, like objects in motion stay at motion unless they are arrested. Like literally, the job of a police officer, or like one of their, is to have the discretion to stop your movement through a given space. So yeah, that's like language. Etymology is very helpful. I'd recommend actually if you ever like, just like if you're writing an essay, but also you just like want to think about like words, like looking where they come from. I'm gonna post a link to it here. There's an online etymological dictionary that's free. It's really good. Here, it's Etym Online. It may take a little bit of time for you to figure out how to like use it and
Incoming
stuff, but
backup
like
request.
this is really, really good. Like Etym Online. And so like if you look at this, it'll give you like, it'll go back like what are the origins of this word, when was it first used, right? And it basically like gives you the full different sources of meaning. All right, we're gonna try and help out some random other person. Let's see. All right, we're gonna help this guy out.
Backup request acknowledged.
We'll see how this goes. We're helping a random person. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm talking to you all.
Coming for you.
Oh. Oh well, he got waxed. I still haven't figured out how to put a mod on these guns, which I would really like to do. I mean, like, also, so it's like you want a couple other etymologies, just like we're talking about policing, right? Like, the word in French for a step is pas, right? Like, a pas de deux. But also, if you learn how to speak French, like ne pas is the construction for not, you know, je ne suis pas, ne, verb pas. It's that's how you do negation, right? It's from an expression, right, an idiomatic expression, not one step. That idea of the step, right, is or of like the march, right, pas. That produces a verb in French, patrouiller, which is to walk through, and specifically to march through territory, right? From this we get the word patrol. So a police patrol is literally a march through, and generally where this comes from is a march through like soggy territory, through like swamps, through like the southern United States, right? Like, I'm not doing like woke stupid shit by like saying like in that like dumb sense of police. Like when I say that like the relation of policing is to like American policing comes from slave patrols. Like that is the case. Like read Alex's book, read Sally Hadley's book about this. Like a lot of Americans confuse slave catching, like hunting slaves who have run away, with slave patrols. No difference, right? Slave patrols essentially are these institutions that come about in the urban South, in places like Charleston, right? Because the South isn't just plantations; there are also ports and stuff, right? Where you have to have like, if you're invested in the maintenance of public order, and part of what police do is they create order, right, or they maintain order. Like, you have to have a force that stops, like, envision this for a moment. You have a place like Charleston. You have a thriving port metropolis in the American South in the antebellum years. And what that means is that you have slaves walking around, going from building to building, doing jobs. Like, literally, like, not all slaves are working on cotton fields, right? Or, like, in houses, in, like, manor houses. A lot of them are trained to do fairly complicated tasks, from shipbuilding to, like, making barrels, right, and more. And they're literally rented out by business owners. Like, this is the thing, like there's a whole... This can be exaggerated, but it's absolutely true. Like, the American... This thing that we have, like, the discipline of human resources, comes, like, a lot of that comes from the slave trade, like, and from slave management. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic here, right? Like, it's not just agricultural labor. It's also skilled labor. It's also people there are slave owners who own a great many slaves, and part of what they do is they literally rent out slaves to other people to accomplish various tasks, right? So if you have a situation like this in a place like Charleston, you have a city where where black people who are enslaved are walking around from job to job, right? And if you're a white person of property, this is a concern because, like, well, how do you know they're not running away? How do you know they're not planning a revolt? And of course, you're terrified of revolts. How do you know they're like? How do you know what their deal is? And the answer is that, and this is again, I really want to be. I'm not being hyperbolic here. Like, you develop systems, and this is what these cities do, for issuing papers, like walking papers or documents proving ownership, but also where they're supposed to be at a given day. And then out of public funds, taxes, or shared, like, community wealth, you appoint these people who are called slave patrollers, who basically walk around, and their job is to stop any black person they see and be like, let's see your papers, where are you going? And that's like, and they carry badges. And the other thing that they do is they have the right to search slave quarters, looking for weapons, looking for books, because slaves, in many cases aren't allowed to read. And to do so even against the wishes of the people who own the slaves, because it's understood there's a public investment in this, right? I mean, folks, like, that, again, like, talk about arresting and stopping people in their movement, there's very little daylight between that and, like, what a police officer does, which is namely stopping people who look like they're a threat, who look like they don't belong, and be like, oh, let's see your ID, where are you going, why are you doing this? I mean, this gets at, like, to tie a loop on it, right, to go back to, like, one of our first conversation, like, topics here, like, this is what the institution of policing is. This is where it's come from. So, like, a lot of these ideas that, like, well, now the police are good just because they're doing this one thing I like. I mean, that institution has a history above and beyond this one moment, right? And there's an inertia there. Yeah, the book I want to recommend on this is, like, there's a book by Sally Hadley. And again, I'm recommending some academic books, like Alex Vitale's book is really good. Sally Hayden, that's her name, forgive me. It's, this is the book, like, I teach this when I teach my policing class, right? This is, Johnson, check this out. Like, basically, it's like, like, the job of slave patrols is basically to oversee urban territory, stop every black person they see and ask them for their papers. And then they have the right to arrest them until their master shows up and be like, oh no, this person's supposed to be. Like, this is the thing, like, I think a lot of people, like, like, Django Unchained shit aside, like, the Confederacy had rule of law, right? There was, like, law and order in the Confederacy. Which is to say, there is a system of law and order for every fucking social arrangement. The fact that, like, law and order exists does not necessarily make that law and order system righteous. And again, like, I'm not being hyperbolic here, like, many of the same people that ran those institutions, that did the slave patrolling, that collected the taxes to pay for it, became the first police officers in the South after the Civil War. Like, there's direct institutional continuity. Some of them moved north and started patrolling in northern cities too. Like, it's, we're taught to think about different moments in history as being, like, very clearly different, but, one thing ends, the other thing starts, but in fact, I think a lot of the same people stick around. Yeah, this auto aim is pretty cheap, but I'm just gonna rock it. Pretty much, Johnson. I mean, like, I mean, like it's also like this is like okay, like I'll tie it back to where we were in the beginning, right? Like I don't know, like we'll go till 10, and then I think I kind of want to like play DayZ with people. So if y'all want to hop on and play DayZ off the stream, I'll be in the server.
Serious
But like,
trauma detected.
there's a lot of talking about like oh shit, I'm gonna get an M60. Yes, sorry. I just need to rock out on the M60, the pig. Sorry. Like, there's a lot of talk about like reforming these institutions, right? And like let's do a little etymology here, like reshaping, bringing a thing back to what it should be, right? But if the origin of an institution is to treat human beings like objects and maintain racial control, what does it mean to reform it? Like, what does it mean to like bring it back? Like, this is the thing where this is what's at play. Like, I opened our stream by asking like, what does it mean to talk about the police as failing, right? Oh shit. Belt-fed magazine here. All right, let's do this. Right, like, is it a failure of the police if the purpose of the police is to protect property no matter what? Like, I don't. Just because the police aren't doing what you want doesn't mean they're failing. Oh my. Let's go, Whitey. You got that's an interesting question. So like, Eric Foner's book on Reconstruction is really important on this. Like, there is martial law at a certain point in the South. Right, and so Union troops basically take on what are called policing activities, right? By the early 1870s, however, restive whites are increasingly brazen about defying the authority of Union troops, many of whom are black. And this produced a situation, I think it's in Greenville, where a bunch, I think this is 1872, 73. I read about this in my book, and so you know I'm gonna get it wrong now, but please buy the book anyways. You know, we're several beers in, safe space, etc. Right? At a certain point, white mobs led by white elites, newspaper owners, governors, basically former Confederate officials, but who are only of a certain, you know, who have not been purged, start like doing things like killing black troops and refusing their orders, and I think the situation in Greenville is they actually raid the armory and they free a bunch of their friends and I think lynch several Union troops who are black, and then there are no consequences, and I think in fact the person who leads that mob becomes a senator. Like, so yeah, like I think the unfinished project of Reconstruction is one in which there is a brief moment of military rule in the South by federal forces, and then the same people who were in charge with some minor shakeups, no, hey, we're in Chinatown, wind up running things anyways. Like, I will also say that there's a...
These animals need to be put down.
Right, they're patrolling. Talk about a useful word. Like, this is also part of the story with like denazification, or like if you talk to a historian like Stuart Schrader's work, who I've recommended a lot in this stream, gets into this. Like, a lot of what like we call like denazification in Germany, in U.S. occupation in like the 1940s, is not really denazification in the sense that like it's like, you know, you think delousing or something. It's actually deciding which Nazis we're going to keep in power. Like, and I'm not being hyperbolic here. It's like is this police chief was a member of the SS, but he was not an SS Obersturmbannführer, and he knows the city, so we're going to keep him. Like, we need somebody to work with because communists are bad. We need police. Right, so it's like a lot of like these like again these kind of we lost context. No, I think I may have wandered into an area where I am underpowered given the level of people on site. I think I might be on K Street, yeah. Like, this is the same, like, I mean, fuck, folks, like, a whole bunch of Nazis are involved in training the U.S. Green Berets and, like, creating Operation Phoenix in Vietnam. Like, there's, like,
Civilians in distress.
it's... I shouldn't say too much there. Yeah, Jamel's great. Jamel's a friend, and his work is good. I strongly recommend everything Jamel does. I don't know, we're just hanging out. Like, I had, like, certain goals written down. Like, we've talked about most of them. My plan here is just to keep drinking and hang out. So, actually, you wanted a cool book? Andrew Feinstein, also a friend, and he's a South African politician, but is a good guy, has a book called The Shadow World. It's about the arms trade. But yeah, like, this ties back in with some stuff we talk about in the Call of Duty Black Ops thing, and like Gladio, like, when the occupying U.S. military forces take over Western Europe, like, they're very scared of communism. They need people who have military training and who know the territory and who have access to, like, you know, like, men who are willing to fight operator types. You go to Nazis for this, right? And what Feinstein documents there is, like, a lot of, like, the West German arms industry, which, you know, was also involved in how we, like, you know, sold weapons to various proxies and, you know, in Africa and elsewhere, we're straight up fucking Nazis. like actual straight up, like, Otto Skorzeny style Nazis. But, you know, like, they were helpful for us. Alright. We're gonna help Muslim Jesus Man here. Alright, buddy.
Accepting backup request.
Yeah, the Years of Lead are the way to go with this. Like, Alex, my friend Alex Yablon has a good stuff about the Years of Lead stuff. Like, I think that's probably what we're looking at, right? I think we're gonna get a lot of, like, really weird violence in the years to come. Like, the next 4 years, there's gonna be a lot of violence, and it's gonna be unclear, like, who's doing it? Is it the right? Is it the left? What, we need to support the police? Like, it's gonna be fucking weird. And some of it's going to be, like, just, like, quote-unquote crazy people. Some of it's going to be savvy operators. Some of it, you know, like, we're never going to know who does it. But it's going to produce a strategy of tension, right?
Hostile broadcast
It's
picked
una
up.
della tensione, as Italians say. And, like, we're just going to get, like, low-level, constant violence, I suspect. And consolidation and control in various state agencies. It's going to be a little, like, I think we're probably also, you want to talk about something that's fucking scary, I think we're going to get some competition between different U.S. security agencies. I think some of the stuff we're seeing right now between, like, the police and, like, the military is going to happen more. Right? I think there's going to be some weird fucking shit. Like, the next 4 years are going to be weird.
If you want freedom, join us.
Yep. Space Force for One. Yeah, Space Force for One can drop, like, tungsten rods, like, do orbital bombardments. I'm gonna say, you know, you can get a Space Force K-bar. I was like, this shit's so cool. If I could just drop $100 on a Space Force K-bar, I'd buy a Space Force K-bar. You should actually, if you would like to own a knife that's useful for camping, for, like, you know, I have it somewhere here. I don't fucking know. K-bars. K-bars are great, folks. Yeah. But yeah, like, you can get a green PVC bladed K-bar. I actually think I have my K-bar. I probably shouldn't wave my K-bar around on this. Yeah, K-bars are good knives, but they make a Space Force one. I wouldn't blame you if you bought it. I nearly did. But the reason I didn't is because my old K-bar is working great. So, don't need two of them.
This is our chance to create the city we want. So let's show those motherfucking true sons who is really in control.
I wonder about that. The good book about the Yugoslav situation is a paper house, and I forget who that's named. Who wrote that? Fuck, folks. I was on a long Yugoslav kick for many years now. It's fun as fuck.
Reach out on spice. Hell, enjoy yourself.
I think we don't have quite the regionalist ethnic sectarianism did, and I also don't think we quite have a clear analogy for like the ones that figure is there.
Progress
But
halted.
yeah. Oh shit!
Required. Hostile broadcast picked up.
This is our chance to create the city we want. So let's show them
Yeah, Cooper has us.
Immediate
Oh, there you go.
assistance needed.
we're in control.
I'm like thinking like also where it's like one of the interesting things about this, the Yugoslav war analogy, right, is that like certain regions do just break and they take the army with them, right? Like the Slovenians in particular, right? Like the Slovenes, like they're. Okay, I need an access key.
We got? I think it's safe to say that nobody knows. Have a drink. Freak out on spice. Hell,
Yeah,
enjoy
I think Three-Toed, you're right on that. Like, I think we could see like some like Arkan's Tigers kind of situation, like that, like these kind of like figures who are like criminal, military, like mobster types. Like, yeah, I can see. I think we have a lot of room for that. That feels very American.
Back the hell off before you get yourselves killed. You have no idea.
Progress resumed.
Yeah, Richard, you're right about the Secret Service people. Like, they have this thing where they keep on doing cocaine and stiffing sex workers, no pun intended. Like that's been a problem.
Manual override required.
Like, that's a real issue. Like, if you're gonna go to Cartagena, wonderful place, by the way, everyone should go to Cartagena. But like, if you're gonna go to Cartagena and just like have sex with sex workers, you should pay them. Like, you shouldn't be like, I'm a U.S. Secret Service agent. That doesn't carry. Like, you can't. They're not going to be able to pay their like Colombian bills with that. But yeah, apparently like all these Secret Service agents, like they were doing this in Nevada too. Like, they're just having sex with like, again, prostitutes and not paying them. I don't know, man. Fucking Secret Service. Really, the White House door thing? I didn't know that. Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was a bunch of like the White House party crashers. That's right.
Hostile broadcast picked up.
My takeaway from this is that I actually really do want a real life M14. They make M14 SOCOM like a SOCOM thing with like a tactical rail type situation. It's all like polymer. They're like $1,500, but they look pretty amazing. Just saying. Sorry. Are they really? Jesus. That's interesting. That's interesting, Three-Toed. So I'm about a third of the way through Walter Lacour's book on guerrilla warfare, and yeah, my takeaway from that, like, which is from the 70s, like, there were German military theorists in the 1930s being like, oh yeah, there's no way in hell in which like the British can maintain counterinsurgency domination in Burma and Egypt at the same time. Like, this idea that like any empire's military can have like the stamina to or like material capacity to do endless repression thousands of miles away from the core, like, it's complete folly. Like, there's no logistics like supply chain that's going to make that possible. Like, Lacour is like noting this in the 70s, drawing on, again, German military theorists in the 20s. Like, I don't know. Oh shit, public execution. Shit. Oh, this is gonna end poorly. This is gonna end poorly.
Vital signs critical.
Fuck me. Oh yeah, I got the M60. Actually, maybe we'll be okay.
Detecting additional hostile contacts.
Yeah. Inver War's work is great. Dan's a friend. I recommend his work very highly. God, I can't even imagine what a 308 at close quarters would do to a body. Jesus Christ. Hostages saved, folks. We're getting better at this.
That showed him.
Dan, the spear's amazing.
Oh. Thought I was gonna die. Thank God you came along.
I think I might be getting hooked on the Division too. This is gonna be my thing.
Make it quick, will you?
Dan, you're right though. This game's great.
I'm reloading.
It may just be this M14 too. Like I just love the way this thing feels. Ooh. No, that's a that's I think the
Hostile control point identified.
fuck. It's not Ghost Recon. It's Wildlands. I think it's Ghost Recon Wildlands, the one that goes to Bolivia, and that's like an open world GTA style one. This is like a This is like a third person Destiny loot shooter thing. I'm not sure if it's the same Ubisoft Studios as that. I did. Basically, folks, part of how I committed myself to doing this is back during the Christmas sales, not this past one, but maybe like last year. I definitely, got a little bit tipsy and bought a lot of military games, and so I have a copy of Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. And so at some point, I'd actually like to have my friend Christy on to talk about the drug wars. But yeah, we'll be playing some of these other Tom Clancy games. I think I'm thinking about how we're gonna be structured. Come February, we're gonna have a conversation about how we're gonna be structured. Stream broadcast stuff. Oh, I will call nearby allies.
Reinforcements en route.
Well, let's go, Whitey. That's basically the problem. Like, it's an issue, Slade.
Like, I don't drink much at all. Like, I'm a cheap date, but when it happens, I just buy video games. Because I'm like, I'll play this with people. Make me read books about them. All right. Okay. Oh! My man just took 2 rounds from the M14 in the head, and he's okay. Fuck Lincoln Project, though. Like, all those people are pieces of shit. Sorry, I'm not even gonna...
Launching grenade!
I'm not gonna...
See how you like this? You won't do that to me.
These animations with the M60 here are a little unrealistic, but that's okay. Oh!
Immediate medical assistance needed.
I think I may have gotten myself... Oh, no, oh, no, oh,
Agent
no.
down.
Oh, that was
Agent
unnecessary.
deceased. Requesting backup.
Oh, this game is gonna definitely need my life. There's no question. That's okay. Alright, we're gonna go one more death, and then I'm gonna log off this and just like play DayZ and organize boxes for a while. Has anyone checked the news in the past 2 hours? Has there been another assault on the Capitol? Has Olympus fallen? These guys, they just want to be there to like as power brokers for this next stuff. You say what you will about Twitter, but where else can I call Josh Hawley's son? Like, just, you know, where else can you do this? Like, it's a good thing.
You are now group leader.
I would
Another
absolutely
agent
free-toad.
is
That
now
would be
in your group.
amazing. Like, there were like death squad leaders who were soccer
Backup
players,
has
right?
arrived.
Like, Josh Hawley, this is terrible. All right. Oh, hey, cool. I've got a friend. We've met an online friend. Let's do this. All right, cool. I don't actually know. I don't know how to do emotes, but that's okay. There we go. All right, this just got very interesting. Our friend Richard and Kill by a Kid, they're joining us. All right, this is gonna get really interesting. We're following our friend Richard. We're probably just going to get killed, and that's okay.
Civilians in danger.
Thanks. Thanks for all your...
Jesus Christ, what does this guy do?
Incoming hostiles
Higher level
detected.
characters, damn. Alright. I love this guy reshowed. Also rocking the M14, folks.
Hostage health is critical.
Think they're out of ammo? Are they down?
We're just gonna play the division. I've hit that point where I can only talk so much. Just hang out. Where are the bad guys? Okay. Eh. I've been enjoying the Expanse, frankly. Okay.
Engaging from the flank!
Detecting additional hostile contacts.
We're just gonna keep rolling with my friend, the French Canadian reshowed. He seems to know what he's doing.
Reinforcements incoming.
Okay, so this is cool. I guess like part of it's a dynamic unfolding world, and you can summon people who are playing at the same time to solve various objectives. I never got into Destiny, but I think I could really get into this.
I'm taking way too much damage!
Incoming frag!
Heavily armored hostile detected. Vital signs critical. Agent incapacitated. Group augmentation active.
Alright, Reshowed, you got me? You gonna help me out? Oh, dude, Reshowed, you rock! This is wonderful! I made a friend! Yes, we are the operators. Like, this game, I should say, like, thematically, what this game dramatizes is something that we've already explored in the Call of Duty universe, right? The idea that, like, operators who both cross and maintain the line of quote-unquote civilization versus barbarity are the minimal difference between those two things, right? Like, even as they are continuously becoming traumatized and going back and forth across that and damaged by it, yeah, basically this is a DC where, you know, or in America where only operators can save us, and so we're saving everyone from the hyenas, right? The ravenous, consumptive types.
Priority item detected. Heavily armored hostile detected.
That's it. Well, here we are. Amazing. What's that?
Assistance needed.
You're amazing. I just got handed a power-up of coconut bread. It's amazing. Yeah, pretty much. Like every other game in this world.
Vital signs critical. Agent deceased.
God damn it. Let's see what happens here. Oh my god, this is so good.
Can't leave them out there.
Supply room access unlocked.
This is amazing.
Agent endorsement
Dan gave me
available.
coconut beer. My amazing wife, who is better than me in every way, just brought me coconut bread. Oh, this is great. Well, I think we all know that the Patriots are going to be a right-wing industrial squad, right? Like, we know that. This is great. Just doing like a raid here with a stranger. I love this. We're just gonna keep playing. At this point, I'm just like doing the thing where I'm just gonna like have this beer, eat food, pay attention to the chat. Yes. Yes. Is something happening here? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Good night, Cam. Next week, DayZ. We'll arrange it.
Hostile broadcast detected.
Down here.
Ooh.
Going for the flag. No, I got you back.
Don't fall for their lies.
Watch your flank.
All right, sweet. I got another 5 minutes in this. Me and Rishod are gonna swap this shit. Folks, this has been amazing. I feel like we've learned a lot about ourselves. We've learned a lot about the operator ethos. We've learned a lot about fascism. We've learned a lot about how we don't need to identify with the police. How we can just let the police and right-wing motherfuckers like do their thing without having to feel, you know, compelled to identify with either of them, right? But also, like seriously, like,
It's time to face reality.
Friendly
it's okay to be scared about what's happening right now. Like, it's okay to not know what you feel about any of it, right? Like, I don't know how I feel about this shit. Like, I totally don't. Like, I have like certain like, and I'm not even offering myself an example. I'm just speaking for myself because this is a crazy fucking time. Like, have like certain guidelines for what you're not comfortable with, and like trust your gut. Like,
I think, like, you know, at the point in which, like, people are like, oh yeah, we need to watch other people get fucked up. Like, now it's a turn for, like, now the cops are good because they're cracking the right skulls. Like, you know, let them say it. You don't have to co-sign that. Like, you don't have to do that shit. Like, there's no...
Access key detected.
This is gonna happen whether or not you are involved. Whether or not, like, you
Override required.
mortgage your...
Wait till tomorrow.
Right? Like, you don't have to do that. Like, there's no reason. And like, it's okay to be like...
Progress resumed.
I think this is again something I was talking with Richard about, right? Like, which a lot of you have talked to me about. Like, I think like fear is a very malleable generic emotion, and it leads towards more fear. And you don't need to be a node in recreation. You just don't. Like, you don't have to have the answers. I don't have the answers, but like, you just don't need to. You don't need to be. You don't. Just because you don't have the answers doesn't mean you have to like take other people's obviously bad answers.
Manual override required.
Like, if there's any one thing we've done over the course of the past, like, indefinite past, and recent or otherwise, it's like double down on more police answer. Like, you don't need to co-sign that just because you don't have another idea, or just because like it feels good. You don't have to do that. Like, it's okay to not have that answer. Like, maybe you're not. Maybe you're like worried about what defunding means. Fine. Like, talk to people about that. You don't have to come out against it. You just don't need to do that. Like, you can just like care for the people around you and not cheerlead violence. Like, that's all you need to do. Like, you don't have to do more than that if you don't want to. Like, but just don't. I think one thing we've explored today is how like the default in this country, or whether it's because of like, you know, what the Zimbardo prison experiment reveals, or anything, is like people like to identify with authority and like to see themselves as being in charge, even when they're not. And you know what? If you're not in charge, that's okay. You don't have to be, right? But like, you don't have to. Just because you feel powerless, you don't have to.
Documentation
I think
inactive.
that's our takeaway. All right, I'm gonna wave goodbye to our friend Rishod, and then I'm gonna wave goodbye to everybody else. And then I'm gonna go like